The series begins with a news report about a young man named Kong Min, who has been arrested for harassing a female student and assaulting a male student who tried to help. Since Kong Min is the son of the chairman of one of the largest food companies in the country, the case gains significant attention. At the same time, Officer Ra Sion watches the news tensely. When her colleagues ask what's wrong, she immediately expresses concern about the lawyer who will defend the wealthy young man. On the other side, the lawyer Sion is referring to Jae-sang meets with Kong Min's family. Jae-sang has already made arrangements and used his connections with the judge who will oversee the trial. The trial proceeds soon after, with the victim recounts the incident, explaining that he was walking home when he heard a girl crying. Upon arriving, he saw Kong Min behaving inappropriately toward her, so he stepped in to help. In response, Kong Min hit him with a stick and punched him in the face. Officer Sion, listening in the courtroom, appears anxious as Jae-sang begins to question the victim. Jae-sang points out that Kong Min's family had offered a settlement of 50 million won, but the victim's father demanded 200 million won. Jae-sang then presents information implying that the victim's family is trying to extort money. Because of this, the victim struggles to defend himself. Next, Jae-sang calls the girl involved in the incident to testify, but she has either been bribed or threatened as she gives a false statement, blaming the victim for the assault. Sion, furious upon hearing this, nearly lunges at Jae-sang, but her colleague restrains her. In short, Jae-sang presents evidence that Kong Min was under the influence of antidepressants and alcohol, making him incapable of rational thinking. Combined with his behind-the-scenes connections with the judge, Kong Min is ultimately acquitted. Because of this, Sion storms out of the courtroom, enraged by the lawyer's actions. Unable to contain her anger, she charges at Jae-sang and kicks him to the ground. Not only that, Sion also twists his arm and chokes him. Shortly after, back at the office, Sion's superior reprimands her. But Sion responds that this always happens, with Jae-sang helps criminals escape justice, and they never face punishment. The scene then shifts to Jae-sang handling a new case, still involving the same family, but this time related to their food company. At that moment, the head of the department, while handing the case to Jae-sang, warns him that before proceeding, he needs to deal with the violence accusations made against the family's mother. However, Jae-sang feels exhausted by the behavior of the entire family, until his colleague is surprised with his condition, asking if he was attacked by Sion again. Jae-sang then sighs and says this is the third time she has confronted him. He recalls the times after the trials when Sion yelled at him, hit him with a hammer, and another time when she grabbed his hand as if to strike him, but he let it go, saying he had bigger problems to worry about. On the other hand, after her outburst against Jae-sang, Sion is punished by being assigned to traffic duty, where she checks drivers' blood alcohol levels. During her shift, Sion stops a driver, and soon after, Jae-sang suddenly pulls up behind her. As a result, Sion gives him a scornful look and moves on to the next car. However, Jae-sang seems intent on talking to her, pretending his car has a problem and pulling over. Seeing this, Sion approaches him to give a warning. At that moment, they exchange a few words before Jae-sang starts yelling at her, claiming she attacked him and demanding compensation. Sion retorts that it was animal abuse, not assault, because he's not human. Because of this, Jae-sang insults Sion, saying many people must hate her. Sion responds that her life is better than his because he makes a living by helping bad people escape justice. She adds that if she had known what would happen, she wouldn't have helped Jae-sang 12 years ago, as she now regrets her actions. The scene then shifts to a flashback 12 years earlier. At that time, Jae-sang was walking home from school late at night. While urinating by the roadside, a girl suddenly ran toward him, saying someone was trying to kill her. Moments later, a man approached while holding a knife. As a result, Jae-sang was terrified. The man then stabbed twice, but the knife hit the book he was carrying, and Jae-sang managed to knock the attacker unconscious. Later, Jae-sang was taken to the police station for assault, with the attacker demanding a settlement of 10 million won. As Jae-sang tried to explain his actions, the police officers treated him poorly, demanding evidence. At the same time, Sion was observing the situation, and she decided to help him. As Jae-sang was pressured by the victim's family to pay more money, Sion brought the girl involved in the incident to testify. After the case was resolved, Jae-sang thanked Seon and told her that the case was successfully closed. Seon felt relieved and happy, as it was the first case she had helped solve. Back in the present, Seon had just finished her night shift when she saw a man standing in front of the police station. After speaking with him, the man said that his daughter, Young-ju, had called him, saying someone was following her, and then the call was cut off. Without wasting time, the man rushed to the location his daughters mentioned, but only found a button with the letters on it, the initial of Suchon, the chairman of the food company. It turned out Young-ju worked as a secretary in Suchon's office, and the man suspected that the chairman had kidnapped his daughter. Shortly after this report, Suchon's wife, Ae-suk, called Jae-sang to her office to handle the situation. Later, Seon and Young-ju's father arrived at Jae-sang's office, presenting evidence that Suchon and Young-ju had exchanged affectionate messages, making it unlikely that the chairman would kidnap her. After a tense debate, everyone left to investigate further. In the parking lot, Seon found Jae-sang and punched him for mocking and belittling her. They then went to the department head to gather more information. At that moment, they discovered that Ae-suk, aware of her husband's affair, had used his absence to deal with Young-ju herself. They also managed to locate where the girl was being held. At the same time, Young-ju was shown tied up, surrounded by the thugs who had kidnapped her. Upon receiving this information, Seon and Jae-sang immediately called the police station and rushed to the location. When they arrived, the place appeared empty. They then searched the area until they found a room with a metal drum. When they opened it, they discovered Young-ju's body inside, which horrified Jae-sang and made him vomit. After dealing with the situation, Seon confronted Jae-sang, blaming him for the girl's death. Seon said that if he hadn't wasted time defending Ae-suk, Young-ju would still be alive. As a result, Seon accused him of using people's lives to make money. At the same time, Jae-sang was deeply affected by her words and decided to confront Ae-suk. When Jae-sang arrived at Ae-suk's residence, she yelled insults at him, but Jae-sang quietly recorded her confession and threatened to expose her. Ae-suk was furious as Jae-sang left, and she immediately called someone to take care of the situation. On his way home, Jae-sang called Seon to meet and give her the evidence. Unbeknownst to him, a car had been following him, and eventually, it rammed into his vehicle, causing it to spin before crashing into a road barrier. Seon, hearing the loud crash, became worried. Moments later, a truck that had been waiting nearby sped toward Jae-sang, intending to finish him off. Some time later, Jae-sang woke up in an unfamiliar place. He was then greeted by Seon, who claimed to be his wife. At the same time, Jae-sang saw their wedding photo hanging on the wall and felt utterly confused, wondering what was happening. Not only that, but he also had a child with Seon named Bona. Thinking it was all a dream, Jae-sang ran to his law firm in a panic. He then burst in, shocking everyone. At that moment, he saw the prosecutor he used to mock sitting in his firm with his boss and was taken aback. After talking in circles for a while, his boss stood up and scolded Jae-sang, calling him a prosecutor from the police, which shocked him even more. Jae-sang was then dragged out, and Seon picked him up, pulling him into the car and telling him about the current situation. Seon then explained that Ae-suk, the wife of Suchon, the chairman of Ganga Food Corporation, was being investigated for the disappearance of Young-ju. Not only that, Kang-min, the son of the Ganga company, whom Jae-sang had previously helped avoid punishment, was now in prison. Additionally, Seon also mentioned that they had been living together for 6 years, which left Jae-sang stunned for a few seconds. In short, Jae-sang got dressed and went to his current prosecutor's office. Upon arriving at his office, a colleague came in and showed him a video featuring Young-ju. In his mind, Jae-sang thought this was a parallel world, created by his guilt, a world to help him fix his past mistakes. Relying on his previous memories, Jae-sang called everyone to the house he and Seon had investigated before. Jae-sang went into a room and saw the metal box he remembered seeing in the other world. But when he approached and opened it, there was nothing inside. It turned out in this world, they found no clues during the search. Afterward, Jae-sang was dragged away by his boss, Suk-jun, who scolded him for causing a commotion and allowing Suchon to flee to another country. Jae-sang then decided to call Ae-suk to the police station to question her about the situation. Ae-suk seemed hostile upon arrival. However, Jae-sang knew her weakness for being taunted, so with just a few questions, he made her angry and sit down in frustration. Ae-suk's lawyer, Yoon-ki, then said that his client would not answer any more questions. As they were about to leave, the chief prosecutor received a call ordering Ae-suk's immediate arrest for assaulting a subordinate with confirmed injuries. As a result, Ae-suk was then handcuffed. Not long after, Seon called Jae-sang to the rooftop to talk, asking how he knew the company's secret information. Seon thought Jae-sang had bought it from someone. However, Jae-sang said that he would make Ae-suk pay for her actions. Hearing her husband's words, Seon felt that Jae-sang was amazing and cool. The scene then shifts to the police team, continuing their investigation into the disappearance of Young-ju. At that moment, Jae-sang explained that since he worked in Ae-suk's office, he knew she would have two phones, a personal phone and a work phone. Jae-sang also discovered that the two phones were not in the same location. During the day, they were at the same place, but at night, they were in different locations. From this explanation, they speculated that the person having an affair with Soo-chan wasn't Young-ju, but someone else. While thinking, Jae-sang noticed a bear keychain and said he knew who the person was. After that, Jae-sang called the office head, Jin-hee, who often went out with Soo-chan, to talk. Upon meeting, Jae-sang directly stated that Jin-hee was the one having an affair with Soo-chan. At first, Jin-hee kept denying it, but her voice faltered. Jae-sang then told her that if she didn't help them find clues, he would reveal everything and let Ae-suk know that she was Soo-chan's real mistress. With no other option, Jin-hee then called the group who had kidnapped Young-ju, and the police tracked the call, immediately heading out to find her. While Seon and Jae-sang were on the way, they suddenly wondered why Young-ju was still alive. Since Soo-chan was planning to leave the country, they must have planned their escape together and then dealt with Young-ju. Not only that, they wouldn't dare do anything rash since the case was being investigated nationally. Because of this, Seon quickly changed direction and headed toward the port. At that moment, Seon and Jae-sang managed to locate the kidnappers and saw Young-ju preparing to board a ship. As Jae-sang tried to grab his phone to call for backup, Seon suddenly shouted that she was a police officer and charged forward like a warrior, demanding the release of the hostage. While Jae-sang also ran out. Seeing their recklessness, the kidnappers also rushed toward them, ready to confront them. Unexpectedly, Seon fought fiercely against the kidnappers while telling Jae-sang to run. As a result, two of the kidnappers chased him into a wooden crate area, but Jae-sang managed to subdue them. As he ran back, Jae-sang suddenly noticed tall boot prints following his own. Jae-sang then saw two kidnappers aiming guns at Young-ju, so he quickly pushed a stack of items onto them and pulled Young-ju to safety. The kidnappers pursued them, pointing guns at Jae-sang and threatening to kill him. Just at that moment, the backup team arrived with Seon and shot the kidnappers, ending the threat. After this tension, Jae-sang passed out, and Young-ju was successfully rescued from the kidnappers. Not long after waking up, Jae-sang quickly went to Young-ju's hospital room and saw her with her father, both looking happy and cheerful. Seeing this, Jae-sang recalled the scene of Young-ju's death in the previous world, along with Seon's words blaming him. As a result, Jae-sang was overwhelmed with guilt and tears filled his eyes. As he walked out, Jae-sang remembered that Seon had been waiting. When he arrived, Seon immediately jumped toward him and kissed him, leaving Jae-sang shocked. At that moment, Seon was visibly ecstatic, having solved a major case together with her husband. After returning home, Jae-sang immediately went to sleep. The next day, Jae-sung was rudely awakened by his daughter, Bona, farting in his face, which startled him. Realizing he was still in this world, Jae-sang screamed in shock as he couldn't accept this reality. At the same time, his strange behavior caused Seon and Bona to panic. Until suddenly, Jae-sang's body went stiff, and he collapsed onto the bed. His eyes seemed to shatter into fragments of memories, with flashes of him dying in a hospital bed crossing his mind. A short while later, Jae-sang returned to normal, then rushed to the bathroom to wash his face and noticed a large scar on his hand. During breakfast, Sion mentioned that they would be visiting his subordinate, but Jae-sang didn't remember who that person was. Sion then explained that Ae-suk had tried to kill him by crashing into his car, but instead injured his subordinate. When they arrived at the hospital, the doctor informed them that his subordinate might regain consciousness within a week. As a result, Jae-sang grew even more confused and asked for details about the accident. Later, Jae-sang went to the archive room and found that all the dates and events matched. He began to think that he was in a coma in the real world and had fallen into this alternate world where everything here was different from reality. Jae-sang then figured that he could only return when he woke up in the real world, possibly in a week as the doctor had mentioned about his subordinate. After that, Jae-sang sat at his desk, lost in thought. Soon after, his subordinate brought him a stack of case files that needed to be resolved, all within a week. With no other choice, Jae-sang began working on the cases. They included an elderly woman pretending to be deaf while kidnapping her husband, a married couple fighting in the interrogation room, someone pulling the prosecutor's hair, and a man trying to escape by faking a seizure after putting soap in his mouth. However, these absurd cases only left Jae-sang feeling frustrated. On the other side, Sion and her colleague were seen talking at the hospital. They encountered a man named Do-shik, who clearly had bad intentions, and began mocking them. Sion responded by saying she knew Do-shik was planning to run for mayor, sarcastically adding that she hoped to see him at the police station, whether for campaigning or being investigated. It turned out Do-shik is the chairman of a financial company, and news reports highlighted his charitable activities and his announcement to run for office. However, Sion eyed him with suspicion. Apparently, while feeding an elderly man in front of cameras, Do-shik was once splashed with porridge. Though he pretended to care, behind the scenes he hit the old man. On the other hand, Jae-sang went to the location of his accident, thinking that if he died there, he might return to the real world. He then tried running into the path of an oncoming car, but jumped back when the vehicle sped toward him. As a result, Jae-sang angrily blamed the car for nearly killing him. After that, Jae-sang and others were called to a meeting at the prosecutor's office to discuss a missing person case. The victim was Jang-mi, who had left home the day before and hadn't returned. At that moment, they were given 24 hours to find her, so the team headed to her house, where they met her blind father and Jang-mi's female friend. While Jae-sang questioned them, he noticed that the female friend was answering on Jang-mi's behalf, which seemed odd to him. After that, Jae-sang entered the house, while Jang-mi's female friend nervously followed him inside. After everyone left, Jae-sang decided to meet Jang-mi's friend privately to get an honest answer. At that moment, he asked if Jang-mi worked at a nightclub, and the girl started explaining all the hard jobs Jang-mi had taken in the past. She insisted that Jang-mi would never accept such work under any circumstances. During this time, a group of debt collectors suddenly arrived at Jang-mi's house, demanding she repay a debt she had already paid off. It turned out, they had even followed Jang-mi to her workplaces to cause trouble, leading to her frequent firings. Meanwhile, other officers investigating Jang-mi's case found that every witness told a different story, leaving them confused. Eventually, they all called Jang-mi's father, trying to convince him to undergo eye surgery, but he insisted on waiting for Jang-mi. With no other option, Jae-sang bluntly stated that Jang-mi had run away from home due to her large debts, leaving her father behind. It was finally revealed that Jang-mi's father couldn't accept that his daughter had abandoned him, so he fabricated a story about her disappearance to involve the police. Nonetheless, Jae-sang also reassured him that they weren't detectives, and they were there to help him find Jang-mi. Afterward, Sion approached Jang-mi's father to comfort him. Some time later, Jae-sang received news that his subordinate in the hospital was recovering well and might regain consciousness within 3 days. Jae-sang was overjoyed, thinking that when his subordinate woke up, he too would wake up in the other world and return. While Jae-sang was feeling happy, Sion came in and scolded him for forgetting to pick up their daughter. As a result, when the two finally arrived, Bona was crying and blaming her dad. At home, Bona crossed her arms and arrogantly declared she would never speak to Jae-sang again. However, when she overheard her mom saying that her dad would read her 10 books in a week, Bona started playing with him again. The next day, Sion received a report that a hand had been found in a trash can. They believed it belonged to Jiang Mi because the hand was wearing a bracelet she often wore. Soon after, they got news that Jiang Mi's father's ex-wife had mysteriously returned to allow her husband to undergo eye surgery. As a result, Xian and her colleague went to meet her. Upon meeting, the woman cried and complained, accidentally mentioning that her husband would be devastated if he knew his daughter's right hand had been cut off. However, Xian immediately grew suspicious, as they hadn't mentioned the woman whether it was the right or left hand that had been severed. Back at the office, everyone discussed information about the ex-wife and learned that she had a history of professional fraud. Apparently, she had approached Jiang Mi's father and daughter during a social welfare campaign. They also discovered that Jiang Mi had purchased life insurance with a death benefit of 600 million won. From this founding, everyone suspected Jiang Mi's father's ex-wife as the perpetrator, but Jae-sang stood up and argued that the three of them might have conspired to create this case. After the meeting, they sent people to investigate further to see if they could find other body parts, but nothing was found. At the same time, Du Shik, the chairman of the financial company, was seen inviting a renowned lawyer to assist him with something, and the lawyer gladly agreed. On the other hand, after being intimidated by Xian, Jae-sang went to the office with a gloomy face, even kneeling down and praising Suk-jun's divorce, calling it a true blessing. As Jae-sang pondered this, Xian and her colleague entered and informed him that during the upcoming investigation, Du Shik would be accompanied by a lawyer from a law firm. When they arrived, it was lawyer Yoon Ki, who announced that they would be representing Du Shik. Not long after, the interview began, but Du Shik refused to answer any questions, leaving everything to his lawyer. Jae-sang, realizing he wouldn't get any information, stepped in and told Yoon Ki not to think that those people would help him because, in the end, he was just being used. Outside, everyone was frustrated that they couldn't get any information from the interview and had to let Du Shik go. At the same time, Jae-sang remarked that this case was bigger than they had thought, as one of the largest law firms in Korea was defending Du Shik. Afterward, Jae-sang approached a young man with glasses named Jong Yu and told him that he would be working with the prosecution team on this case. However, Jong Yu seemed unhappy about it, as he had to work with the person who had once put him in prison. After asking around, Jae-sang realized that he was the one who had imprisoned Jong Yu. Not only that, Jae-sang remembered that in the other world, he had defended the perpetrator and proven his innocence. But in this world, the opposite had happened. Later, Jae-sang persuaded a young man to go to a bar where lawyers and reporters often made late-night deals. Jae-sang instructed the young man to steal recordings from there and edit them to manipulate public opinion. The next day, the news aired a report about the deal between the law firm and the reporters. When Du Shik saw this on TV, he was furious, fearing that it would affect his campaign. Du Shik then called Yoon Ki, demanding that he resolve the issue if he wanted to continue living well. On the other hand, the team held a meeting and concluded that Jiang Mi had become a victim of organ trafficking due to her rare blood type. They then split up to further investigate her workplace and the people who had threatened her. At the same time, two of Jae-sang's subordinates went to confront the debt collectors who had previously threatened Jiang Mi. Shortly after entering and exchanging a few words, a fight broke out between the two sides. The leader of the debt collectors ran to his car, intending to escape, but the car wouldn't start. It turned out that Jae-sang's men had sabotaged it. Meanwhile, Jae-sang and Xian went to the place where Jiang Mi had previously worked and confirmed that she had indeed worked at the nightclub, contradicting what her friend had said earlier. Some of the girls told them that debt collectors were constantly looking for Jiang Mi. Despite this, Jiang Mi had left her father because she didn't want anything to happen to him. It turned out she was protecting him from the debt collectors and had been scavenging for food from trash. Hearing this, Xian and Jae-sang were saddened by her situation. Back at the meeting, they gathered all the information they had collected. At that moment, Xian stated that she was convinced Du Shik was behind everything. She explained that all the investigation targets were connected to Du Shik's welfare institution. Additionally, the son of a Korean party representative was set to undergo heart surgery and needed an organ donor. To find a match, Du Shik had organized free health checkups at various locations, and Jiang Mi had been selected as a match. At the same time, Du Shik wanted to secure his election victory, so he did it to win favor with the Korean party representative. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jae-sang became concerned about Do-yo, a witness in the case, fearing for her safety. Because of this, they all decided to protect Do-yo. On the other hand, Do-yo was on her way home when she noticed someone following her. She then tried to run but was stopped by another man who immediately dragged her into an alley and attempted to inject her with a drug. Quickly, Do-yo bit and kicked the man, managing to escape until she was found by Seon's team and rescued. On the other hand, Yoon-ki rushed to find Do-shik to determine whether he was behind the attack, but Do-shik denied it. Unbeknownst to him, Jae-sang had sent people to pose as attackers to scare Do-yo. When they returned to the prosecutor's office, Do-yo, terrified for her life, begged Jae-sang for help. She revealed the people involved, including a man named Pastor Park. Do-yo then explained that this man had approached Jang-mi's father and ensured that she couldn't escape. Not only that, Park also wanted to purchase Jang-mi's organs. After receiving this information, Jae-sang instructed the police to arrest Pastor Park and investigate the hospital where the organ harvesting was taking place. Seon and Jae-sang then went to the hospital to question the board members and doctors. At that moment, Seon declared that she would put both of them in jail and didn't hesitate to wish misfortune upon the councilman's son, as his father had caused the deaths of others. Once everything was confirmed, Jang-mi's father underwent his surgery. Soon after, the team leader, Dong-taek, informed Jae-sang and Seon that Jang-mi was the one who had donated her heart to him. With this information, Seon wanted to tell Jang-mi's father the truth about his daughter, but he already knew. Hearing Jang-mi's heartfelt story, Seon couldn't hold back her tears. At the same time, everyone outside couldn't help but feel uneasy after all those involved had been investigated. At the same time, Do-shik, worried that his candidacy might be jeopardized, sent people to handle the situation. Later, Jae-sang and Seon were at a crematorium, visiting a young girl. Seon then mentioned that the girl was her niece, and that her brother had been convicted of murder. Jae-sang was curious but didn't dare to ask any questions. Until suddenly, Jae-sang received a call informing him that the body of a party representative had been found. Upon arriving at the scene, they learned that Do-yo had also died the previous night, from choking caused by a food allergy. As a result, Seon immediately suspected that Do-shik was responsible. Seon then went to confront Do-shik, causing a scene. At that moment, she immediately accused him of being involved in organ trafficking and warned that if he became mayor, the city would rot. However, Do-shik remained indifferent and asked if she planned to stay a police officer forever or become another body found in the city. Back at the office, Jae-sang called Dong-taek to inquire about Seon's brother, Suk-ho. At that moment, Jae-sang lied, claiming he had lost some of his memories after the accident and needed Dong-taek to explain the story to him. Dong-taek then told him that the city had been planning to rebuild its infrastructure, which had caused intense conflict between the residents and Do-shik. The residents' protests were futile, but Seon's brother, Suk-ho, spoke out. As a result, Suk-ho, who worked as a doctor at the Children's Welfare Institution, became a target for Do-shik. One day, Seon went to the institution to look for her brother, but was shocked to discover Suk-ho in the rubble, curled up in a corner. Suk-ho revealed that Do-shik had sent thugs to intimidate him. Therefore, he asked Seon to investigate if anything happened to him. In short, after purchasing supplies and heading home, Seon encountered a man dressed in black and fought him. The man hit her on the head with a flower pot before fleeing. When she entered the house, she saw blood everywhere as all the children in the room had been killed. Terrified, Seon immediately ran, and as she did, the room suddenly exploded. Back in the present, Jae-sang remembered these events and looked at Seon with a heartbroken expression. The next day, the morning news reported that a famous pharmacist named Pil-woo had just arrived from a flight. He was greeted by Do-shik, who seemed very close to him. However, Pil-woo didn't look pleased to see him, while Do-shik continued to pretend in front of the reporters. The scene then shifts to Jae-sang arriving at the office and meeting with his subordinates. However, his body suddenly stiffens, and Jae-sang clutches his chest. In his mind, Jae-sang sees images of his real body undergoing electroconvulsive therapy. When he opens his eyes again, Jae-sang is in the hospital. At that moment, the doctor tells him that he had fainted and advises him to go home and rest. Upon learning that Jae-sang is in the same hospital as his subordinate who had been in an accident, he rushes to his room. His subordinate's wife then tells Jae-sang that the doctor said her husband might be in a vegetative state. Hearing this, Jae-sang becomes anxious, fearing that his real body might be experiencing the same condition. In another scene, a mother is standing in the rain, waiting for her daughter to return home from school. However, the girl encounters a man dressed in black, carrying a bag with a hammer. The next day, after Jae-sang and Seon finish meeting with a client, they receive an emergency call. Upon arriving at the scene, they find the body of a schoolgirl. The method of the murder matches the one from the welfare institution years ago, leading everyone to believe it's the same perpetrator. After investigating the victim's mother's house, they learn that the neighborhood was also being revitalized for the construction of a research facility. With no other place to go, the family hadn't moved yet. Not only that, Do-shik had visited them and spoken harshly. As a result, everyone begins to understand the situation. At the same time, Seon recalls her brother's case from years ago when they were investigating Do-shik. It turned out, Do-shik had insulted Suk-ho, making him angry. Meanwhile, Jae-sang goes to Yoon-ki's office and says things that surprise Yoon-ki. Realizing that Jae-sang is no longer easily manipulated, Yoon-ki offers him a lucrative employment contract. However, Jae-sang begins to think that if he can't return to the real world, he might as well choose to live his life in this one. Back at the office, Suk-jun scolds everyone for mishandling the crime scene, allowing footage of the victim's family being attacked to spread online. All suspicions fall on Seon's brother, as he disappeared when the incident occurred. However, Seon insists that she believes all these cases are connected to Do-shik, as the locations where they happened are all part of his construction projects. Meanwhile, Jae-sang was lost in thought, considering Yoon-ki's proposal. When Suk-jun turned to him and asked for his opinion, Jae-sang simply smiled and announced that he wanted to resign as a prosecutor, shocking everyone. As a result, Seon's colleague immediately asked her about Jae-sang's decision, but Seon said she didn't know. Soon after, Jae-sang received a message from Yoon-ki confirming the contract with him. After a conversation with Suk-jun, he agreed to let Jae-sang go, but only after he finished this case. Back at home, Jae-sang and Seon argued. However, Jae-sang expressed that he was tired of this kind of life. As a result, Seon was visibly upset, hadn't expected him to say such things. The next day, everyone went to the crime scene to investigate, but they suddenly received news that a prosecutor was holding a press conference to announce the case. When they returned to the office, they found Jae-sang standing at the podium, promising to find the culprit. Because of this, Seon immediately scolded her husband for revealing the identity of the victim's family without having any solid leads. Despite this, Jae-sang explained that he was using the media as a strategy to gather intelligence, which would give them more clues. After receiving information from an elderly woman, they went to question her. At that moment, the elderly woman said that she had seen 3 black cars enter the construction site that night, bringing a girl with them. She also had followed out of curiosity and witnessed them brutally attacking the girl, while Do-shik also standing there. With this information, the team wanted to check surveillance footage, but the elderly woman said there was none. Despite this, Jae-sang instructed them to pretend to investigate, which angered Seon. In short, Jae-sang and Seon took their daughter to an amusement park and sat outside to talk. At that moment, Seon asked why Jae-sang had become someone so reckless, with irresponsible words and wrong choices. In response, Jae-sang replied that the responsibility of a man toward his family was weighing him down. Jae-sang also questioned what he would do if he were alone. As a result, Seon began to think that Jae-sang was planning to leave her and their daughter. Unfortunately, Bona overheard the conversation and misunderstood, thinking that her father was going to leave her and her mother. She began to cry and throw a tantrum, drawing the attention of people nearby. Panicked, Jae-sang quickly picked her up and carried her away. The next day, they went to Do-shik's company to investigate a hit-and-run accident connected to him. Jae-sang deliberately brought up the case of Seon's brother from years ago, which irritated Do-shik. However, Dong-taek, standing beside Do-shik, held him back. At the same time, Seon didn't miss the chance to mock Do-shik, promising that she would make the culprit kneel and apologize. The scene then shifts to everyone sitting in the office when a group of officials entered, saying that someone had filed a report against Sion. It turned out they were there to investigate the relationship between Sion and Sukho. The new boss, having just learned about their connection, scolded Jae-sang and Dong-taek for hiding this fact for years. As a result, he announced that Sion would be temporarily suspended until the investigation was complete. And she could also be charged with intentionally obstructing the investigation by providing false testimony. Afterward, Jae-sang called Yoon-ki and warned him not to touch his wife. Jae-sang then launched a battle against Yoon-ki. As a result, Jae-sang sent someone to steal the memory card from Do-shik's car to use as evidence in the investigation. But when they watched the video, instead of the victim, they saw another girl. At the same time, Dong-taek brought in the evidence he had gathered, confirming information about the suspect. However, when they arrived at the suspect's house, no one was there. They also found a bottle of medication similar to the one collected in Sion's brother's case years ago. Holding the metal bottle in his hand, Jae-sang remembered that Sion had also brought him a similar bottle, asking him to investigate the user. But since the investigation had already been publicly concluded, Jae-sang lied to her, saying no one used the drug, which had left Sion deeply disappointed. Back at the office, they overheard Sion speaking with her subordinate in the room. When they entered, Sion informed them that she had found a new clue. After reviewing the viral video online, Sion noticed an issue with the camera angle and decided to analyze it. After listening to her explanation, Jae-sang realized that the victim's siblings suffered from epilepsy. They also figured out that the victim was the woman who recorded the video, so they decided to look for her first. When the team arrived at her home, the sister wasn't there. The victim's mother was shocked and realized that the suspect was her daughter's close uncle. She also mentioned that after the incident, many people sent donations to the family, and her daughter was always the one managing it. From this founding, the team confirmed that the suspect was using the daughter to get money. They also found traces of sedatives, similar to those found on the victim. As a result, they suspected that the next victim would be the victim's sister, as the suspect had already achieved his initial goal. At the same time, Sion speculated that the suspect would carry out his plan at the construction site, so everyone rushed there. Not long after, while searching for the suspect, the team suddenly encountered the perpetrator and chased him. Realizing he was surrounded, the suspect said some very strange things before do the unthinkable. Everyone was shocked, as the beautiful girl had also been murdered by him. After receiving her daughter's body, the victim's mother cried in front of the reporters. However, Sion suddenly noticed that the mother's clothes were inside out, which was different from how she had worn them earlier when they met. Back at the prosecutor's office, the team gathered to discuss their findings about the victim's mother. All suspicions began to shift toward her, until a young staff member showed everyone hateful comments on social media from an account accusing the victim's mother of being a fraud, claiming she pretended to be a nurse to manipulate many children. At first, Suk-jun didn't want to investigate because the clues were vague, but after hearing everyone's suspicions, he agreed to proceed with an investigation into the victim's mother. That night, Sion couldn't sleep and admitted that she kept thinking about her brother's case from years ago, feeling powerless to investigate it. Jae-sang comforted her, telling her that she didn't have to pretend to be strong. Hearing this, Sion embraced her husband and cried. The next day, Jae-sang was invited to a private meeting with Yoon-ki and Do-shik at their office. It turned out they wanted Jae-sang to join their side, offering him 90% of the company's shares and a commission. Hearing this, Jae-sang then asked what would happen if he refused. Unexpectedly, Do-shik began to threaten him, saying that he would make sure Bona witnessed her father being arrested. While reflecting on Do-shik's words, Jae-sang received a call informing him that they had found the person responsible for the hateful online comments about the victim's mother. Upon locating the person, they learned that the victim's mother had always been very dedicated to her work. She would even use her mouth to clear the children's noses to help them breathe. However, after doing this, all the children mysteriously died. Additionally, there were also reports of her being seen in the bathroom practicing how to cry. When the hospital received complaints, they wanted to cover it up and fired her. The team then sat down to analyze the clues they had gathered. It turned out, the team discovered that the victim's mother had purchased large amounts of baby formula, even though there were no babies in the orphanage where she worked, except for one child in her care. Despite this, the child had a condition that required limiting contact with dairy products. With this information, Jae-sang suspected that the mother's next target was the little girl she was caring for. At the same time, the mother had been live streaming on social media, pretending to cry to gain sympathy from the public. The scene shifts to the woman's home, where she had just finished a live broadcast. She then took out some milk and tried to force it on the terrified little girl. As a result, the girl immediately ran outside, screaming and drawing attention, while the woman cried out, claiming she couldn't live if anything happened to the girl. At the same time, reporters from a TV station arrived with their cameras. One of them mentioned that the woman knew the girl couldn't drink milk, but still bought it from the store. As a result, everyone around her realized that she had done this on purpose. Shortly after, the police arrived. The woman stood there, her face filled with fear and confusion. The woman suddenly stopped crying and shouting when she was handed an arrest warrant from the prosecutor's office, though she tried to defend herself until the police showed her a video. It turned out that a hacker from the police department had hacked into her computer and activated the live stream, recording all her actions with the girl, which became evidence against her. Back in the interrogation room, Jae-sang repeatedly criticized the woman until she broke down. The next day, Jae-sang received a call from Yoon-ki regarding Do-shik's earlier proposal, saying he would wait for his decision by 5 p.m. After thinking about Do-shik's threats, Jae-sang made up his mind. At the police station, the woman, now a suspect, was eating but feeling uncomfortable with her handcuffs. Because of this, a police officer loosened them for her. When the officer turned away and put his gun back in the drawer, the woman took the opportunity to grab the gun when no one was watching. As a result, she took a hostage to escape from the station. Once outside, the woman kidnapped Bona before called Jae-sang, threatening to kill the girl within half an hour. After determining the location where the woman would commit the crime, the prosecutor's team and the police rushed there. When the team arrived, they saw the woman about to harm Bona. Fortunately, Jae-sang quickly distracted her while signaling to Dong-taek and his team to shoot the table leg, causing the woman to miss as she swung her hammer. Seizing the opportunity, Seon immediately punched the woman in the mouth, leading to her arrest, while Bona was safely rescued. After surviving this ordeal, Jae-sang spent more time with his family, playing with Bona. One day, while in the bathroom at work, Jae-sang overheard two of his subordinates talking and learned that the reason Do-shik hadn't troubled him was that Dong-taek had intervened to stop him. Standing in his office, lost in thought about what he had just heard, Jae-sang was startled when his subordinate entered the room. At that moment, his subordinate informed him that several officers had been stabbed and were now in the hospital. Remembering that Seon was also on duty, Jae-sang rushed to check on her. Not long after, Jae-sang ran to Seon's hospital room and saw her lying in bed. Overcome with worry, he started crying, but soon heard Seon snoring. When Seon woke up, she reassured him that she wasn't hurt. Instead, it was Dong-taek who had been injured while protecting her from a knife during a fight with the criminal. Seeing the two laugh and talk happily, Jae-sang felt very uncomfortable. Meanwhile, at a radio station, Do-shik and pharmacist Pil-woo were being interviewed, but it was clear that Pil-woo didn't like it. After the interview, Do-shik took Pil-woo to an empty place, where he began insulting him and even slapped him. Unexpectedly, Seon and Dong-taek had been following them the entire time and were nearby, capturing the incident on camera. At one point, they almost got caught, forcing Seon and Dong-taek to leave quickly, causing Seon to drop her police ID in the process. The next day, Jae-sang took Bona to school, but the teacher called him back, saying she wanted to report a missing girl. Jae-sang explained that they couldn't investigate a case simply because a girl was absent from school. However, the teacher clarified that a few days ago, the girl's mother had sent a message asking for leave. But when the teacher visited the house, she found that the mother had already passed away. Additionally, there was also another woman living there who took the little girl and then disappeared. After asking someone to investigate, they discovered from the landowner that the girl's mother had taken out a life insurance policy in her own name, which named Dum-so as the beneficiary. Learning that Dum-so worked at Pil-woo's research institute, Seon decided to go there and ask more about her. At that moment, a colleague named So-I explained that when she first met Dum-So, she felt sorry for her and tried to help, but Dum-So soon became dependent on her. When So-I decided to leave the company, Dum-So demanded to go with her. Out of kindness, So-I agreed. After inquiring about Dum-So's previous residence, Seon discovered that she had lived in a welfare institution funded by Do-Shik's company. Hearing this, both Jae-sang and Seon were shocked. Meanwhile, Dong-taek and his subordinates continued investigating and learned from neighbors that Dum-So often dressed like So-I and enjoyed when people mistook her for So-I, essentially acting as if she were mentally unstable. On the other hand, Do-Shik found out that Seon was following him. Furious and fearing that his dark secrets would be exposed, he sent people to plan her removal. Sometime later, Jae-sang noticed Seon and Dong-taek being friendly with each other and began to suspect there was something between them. While reviewing some case files, his wife came into the room, but shortly afterward, Seon received a message and left. Suspicious, Jae-sang followed her and saw Seon and Dong-taek enter a house together. Curious, Jae-sang opened the door and saw everyone celebrating with fireworks. He didn't understand what was happening until they explained that they were celebrating a client from his case who had just been released from the hospital. Jae-sang didn't know who this person was until the man finally appeared. To his surprise, it was someone involved in a violent crime in the real world, someone Jae-sang had once forced to confess as the culprit in a previous world. However, in this world, Jae-sang had helped clear his name, and they were now celebrating to thank him. The next day, Jae-sang and Seon went to the hospital, where they received confirmation that So-I had passed away. The doctor said there were no suspicious signs on her body, but the child and the woman who left with her seemed suspicious. Apparently, the young girl often mistook her aunt for her mother and was scolded by the woman. With this information, Seon wondered if the woman had forced the girl to change how she addressed them. At this point, Jae-sang also realized that Dum-So's motive for murder wasn't about the insurance money, but about stealing So-I's life and becoming her. Meanwhile, Do-Shik went to find Pil-woo and attempted to stab him with a piece of glass. Do-Shik then strangled Pil-woo before told him he had to serve him. Seeing how mad Do-Shik was, Pil-woo suddenly called him father, revealing that half his blood belonged to Do-Shik. It seemed that Do-Shik was aware of this, but refused to accept the truth. Instead, he called Pil-woo a filthy creature for daring to call him father. Unexpectedly, Pil-woo warned that if Do-Shik killed him, the whole country would know that he was his son. Back at the prosecutor's office, after discussing the information they had gathered, Suk-jun decided to release Dum-So's information on national television to locate her. At the same time, Do-Shik, concerned about Pil-woo's threat, sent people to harm and eliminate him to prevent future problems. In the office, Suk-jun was happily on the phone with his daughter when he suddenly spilled his coffee in shock, startling his subordinates. At the same time, two team members entered and revealed that they had found the person who previously attacked So-I. The person turned out to be So-I's ex-husband and his brother, which shocking everyone. Upon finding the ex-husband, they learned that the attack occurred because he had mistaken So-I for his wife. He also claimed that So-I had ruined his life by stealing his seal to borrow a large sum of money for her cosmetics business. Not only that, his daughter had once mentioned that her mother and aunt always wore the same makeup, suggesting that So-I had intentionally created a copy of herself. Not long after, Jae-sang and Seon were at a theater to investigate Dum-So's boyfriend. At that moment, the theater director mentioned that they were in love, but after the boyfriend visited Dum-So's house once, he kept avoiding her. The director also handed over a handwritten letter from Dum-So. Not only that, the police also obtained a debt letter from So-I and showed it to Seon. Suddenly, Seon realized that the handwriting of Dum-So and So-I was very similar. Seeing this, Jae-sang showed a photo of all three women to the director and asked who Dum-So was. The director then pointed to So-I. At this moment, Jae-sang understood the situation and stated that the person stealing another's life was So-I, not Dum-So. After befriending Dum-So, So-I began to make her resemble Dum-So and often went out as her. So-I eventually killed Dum-So to take over her life, believing that no one would notice if she assumed her identity. The scene shifts to a garden, where Dumso's boyfriend is tied to a chair with tools around him, while So-ai is preparing to confront him. Hearing her boyfriend call her So-ai, she snapped and screamed that she was Dumso before began choking him. After that, So-ai knelt down, begging her boyfriend to love her, but he called her crazy. Enraged, So-ai stood up and grabbed a siren, terrifying him. Luckily, the police arrived at the scene, rushed in, and immediately faced So-ai, who was shouting in desperation. Seeing this, Jae-sang tried to calm her down, telling her that her daughter shouldn't lose her mother. Hearing these words, So-ai became calm and lowered the syringe. As a result, the police rushed in and arrested her. On the other hand, after asking a friend to investigate the hospital that Do-shik visited every weekend, Seon decided to investigate on her own. In short, she was inside a patient's room when Do-shik and his men arrived, making her extremely nervous. At that moment, Seon hid in another room, but as she overheard Do-shik planning to kill a patient, she nearly stepped closer to see what was happening until she accidentally made some noise. As a result, a priest who was with Do-shik went to check the room. With no other choice, Seon crawled under a bed but was nearly caught. Unexpectedly, the fire alarm suddenly went off, helping her escape. Seon then immediately ran outside and was met by Dong-taek. When Seon returned, Jae-sang ran to embrace her, exhausted as she was. Jae-sang comforted her, holding her hand tightly. Jae-sang suddenly thanked her for choosing him and promised to make her happy, as she was the dream of his life. They kissed in the middle of the courtyard, watched by onlookers filled with envy. The next day, Seon received an award for being an outstanding police officer. That evening, when she came home, she found that Jae-sang had bought her a pair of shoes and invited her to go hiking and camping, which made her very happy. On the other hand, through his men, Do-shik found out that Seon had been at the hospital. Worried that she might expose his secret, Do-shik sent people to make her disappear. That night, while sitting at home, Seon received a text message saying they would give her information about the person she wanted to investigate. The message instructed her to go to a given address, but to come alone. Therefore, she went to an abandoned house. When she entered, Seon was attacked by a man. At that moment, Seon managed to disable him, but soon after, she was hit on the head with a stick by another man and lost consciousness. After that, they tied her up while another man quickly injected her and dragged her inside. Some time later, Jae-sang woke up and couldn't find his wife, becoming extremely worried as her phone was also turned off. After finding out Seon's location, Jae-sang rushed there. When he arrived, Jae-sang saw Seon tied to a chair, but before he could help, he was knocked out as well. When Jae-sang regaining consciousness, they were sitting across from each other. Shortly after, a man in black pulled a hammer from his bag and was about to strike Seon on the head. Seeing this, Seon was terrified, and Jae-sang begged the man to stop. Overcome with emotion, Jae-sang suddenly woke up in the real world. At that moment, Jae-sang still thinking he was in the other world, but after Yoon-ki and his subordinates convinced him that it was reality, not a dream, Jae-sang realized that he had returned to the real world. Shortly after, Dong-taek and his colleagues were interrogating a criminal when they received information that a body had been found in Chodon. With this information, Jae-sang suddenly thought that events in both worlds were happening at the same time and place. Fearing that Seon was also in danger in the real world, Jae-sang instructed his subordinates to investigate whether a murder had occurred in Chodon. As the police team was about to leave, they received notice that the body they had found was someone they knew. After confirming that a murder had taken place in the area, Jae-sang grew anxious, thinking the body might be Suk-ho. As a result, Jae-sang quickly told his subordinates to bring him there. At the crime scene, they had found the body and confirmed that it was indeed Suk-ho, Seon's brother. With this finding, Seon was in shock, while everyone was filled with sadness. When Jae-sang also arrived, Seon was cold and asked how he knew about the situation and came there. At that moment, Jae-sang was still in disbelief that they had found Suk-ho's body, while Seon was also confused about how Jae-sang knew it was her brother and suspected that he might be involved in the case. Unexpectedly, Jae-sang had forgotten that they were enemies in this world and didn't know how to explain what he knew. After returning to the hospital, Sion wanted to talk to Jae-sang to ask how he knew all these things. When they meet, Jae-sang told her that he had dreamed about it, but the more he explained, the less Sion believed him. As a result, Sion said she felt disgusted, as if Jae-sang had known her and been with her for years. However, Jae-sang had grown used to the happiness he shared with Sion in the other world. Seeing her cold attitude now, Jae-sang couldn't hold back his tears. Meanwhile, Do-shik also received information that Sukho's body had been found and the case might be reopened. Do-shik was furious as the mayoral election was approaching, and this situation was happening right in front of him. At the same time, Dong-taek received a report that several other bodies had been discovered in the area where the first body was found, all of them recent murder victims. On the other hand, Jae-sang is seen sat by the lake, reflecting on the happy days he had spent with Sion in the other world, along with his worries about her safety in this one. In this reality, Jae-sang was still playing the role of a lawyer for the opposing side. Sometime later, Jae-sang was summoned by his senior lawyer, who introduced him to Do-shik. Unlike before when Jae-sang had to defend terrible things, this time, he faced Do-shik directly and told him that he hoped he would turn himself in, as Jae-sang would no longer help him with such dirty deeds. Not only that, Jae-sang didn't miss the chance to mock him, calling him a murder suspect. Hearing those words, Do-shik was shocked, while Yoon-ki was equally surprised and uncomfortable with what had been said. After that, Jae-sang resigned from his position, declaring that he would never see Do-shik again before finally walking away. On the other hand, ever since discovering her brother's body, Sion seemed to lose her spirit. At the same time, Dong-taek became very concerned and took her out for a sparring session to help her release some stress. After a while, Sion collapsed and cried, letting out all the tears she had been holding back. Dong-taek then took her home. At her doorstep, Dong-taek hugged her and spoke from the heart, leaving her silent and unsure of how to respond. At the same time, Jae-sang stood outside Sion's house, reflecting on the happy moments with his small family, even imagining Sion and their daughter, Bona, inside. When he realized it was just an illusion, Jae-sang broke down in tears. The next day, a task force was formed to investigate the case of the bodies found in Chodon. The task force leader was introduced, and to everyone's surprise, it was Jae-sang. The entire office was shocked to see him, especially Sion. The team was not happy about Jae-sang leading the investigation. As a result, they all disapproved of the way he had helped criminals receive lighter sentences in the past. Meanwhile, Do-shik's grandmother was seen entering his office, opening the safe, and discovering a hammer inside a box, which turned out to be the murder weapon from the ongoing case, immediately filling her with fear. At that moment, Yoon-ki walked in, startling her. Noticing her gaze fixed on the cabinet, Yoon-ki grew suspicious that something was wrong. In another scene, Jae-sang was in his office when the department head entered, telling him that while he didn't know why Do-shik was here, he would be watching him closely. Jae-sang didn't need to do anything except remain quiet like a puppet and leave. At that moment, Jae-sang wanted to explain, but he didn't know how to convince Suk-jun in this world. Meanwhile, Sion sat in her room, pondering Jae-sang's strange behavior. She was deeply confused and didn't understand why Jae-sang always seemed to appear wherever she was. When Sion arrived home, she found a gift box at her door. Upon opening it, she discovered it was full of chewing gum, along with a note saying the gift was from her new neighbor next door. Later, Sion planned to bring the gift over to her new neighbor, but was shocked to realize that it was Jae-sang. Seeing Jae-sang acting with a completely different and silly personality left Sion bewildered. Soon after, a group of neighborhood aunts came over to his house for a housewarming party, and Sion couldn't believe her eyes when she saw Jae-sang chatting with them. When she returned home, Sion was still confused and asked why Jae-sang had moved next door. At that moment, Jae-sang playfully teased her, saying that she was the one following him, which only made her angrier. The next day at the prosecutor's office, the department head rushed in, announcing that Do-shik had been summoned for interrogation. Jae-sang calmly stated that he was the one who called him in, surprising everyone. In the interrogation room, Do-shik sat listening indifferently as Jae-sang spoke. At that moment, Jae-sang repeatedly brought up past cases and made it clear that his ultimate target was Do-shik. From that moment, Jae-sang officially challenged Du-shik. On her way home, Seon sensed someone following her. Suddenly, the person rushed toward her, prompting Seon to kick them in the face. When she turned around, she realized it was Jae-sang, whom she had accidentally kicked hard enough to make his nose bleed. As a result, Seon brought Jae-sang back to her place. Sitting in a familiar room, Jae-sang recalled memories with his daughter from the other world. After applying medicine to his nose, Seon tried to send him away, but Jae-sang insisted on going to the bathroom to clean the toilet. Jae-sang even pretended to care by buying snacks and placing them next to the table so Seon wouldn't bump into it. Seon was confused by his actions and kept asking what his true motive was. Jae-sang replied that since he was given a second chance at life, he wanted to live more righteously and choose his own fate. The next day, after a meeting to discuss the clues they had gathered, the investigation team concluded that the murder weapon could be a hammer. They went to the area near the crime scene to investigate a pig slaughterhouse, as they had hammers similar to the murder weapon. Shortly after, the team found the slaughterhouse run by an old man who had worked there for a long time. When asked about the first case in the area, the old man mentioned a woman who had become a prostitute, a blonde woman who did so to attract customers. The woman had a son, but one day, while her son was still in high school, he came home from school to find his mother dead in the yard shortly after his mother's funeral. He moved away. Some time later, Jae-sang and his team then went to find Du-shik's wife, Young-yi, but she seemed to avoid them, saying she would report back to him. However, Jae-sang had a copy of her medical records, which showed signs of abuse, evidence that could be used to save her from Du-shik's control. When Jae-sang mentioned that Du-shik was involved in the murders, Young-yi was shocked. Seeing her hesitation to cooperate, Jae-sang told her that this situation was her last chance to escape with her son, as once Du-shik was elected mayor, Young-yi would never be able to flee. Jae-sang also warned that Young-yi could end up dead at Du-shik's hands and never see her son again. Meanwhile, Du-shik continued pretending to earn people's trust in order to increase his chances of winning the election. At home, however, Du-shik vented his frustration by berating Young-yi and hitting his son, feeling humiliated by them. One evening, Jae-sang was on his way home when he saw Seon stepping out of a car in a drunken state. He followed her, and as they neared her home, a man holding a beer bottle suddenly rushed towards her, attempting to strike her. Fortunately, Seon blocked the attack with her hand, and Jae-sang quickly intervened, causing the man to fall to the ground. When Seon woke up in the hospital, she saw Jae-sang sitting beside her. Seon asked why Jae-sang hadn't disappeared and why he kept hurting her. However, Jae-sang responded by telling her that he would always protect her. On the other hand, Pil-woo is seen hired someone to take a girl to a designated location, where he drove her to a laboratory. As Seon and Jae-sang left the hospital, they ran into Dong-taek, who had feelings for Seon. Seeing how close Jae-sang was to her, Dong-taek hit the brakes abruptly, causing Jae-sang to almost bump his head. After Seon went home, Dong-taek confronted Jae-sang, asking why he was always around her. Jae-sang reassured him, saying there was no need to worry. Once the Du-shik case was resolved, he would disappear. Jae-sang then thanked Dong-taek for his care and protection of Seon, while expressed hope that he would continue to stay by her side. As a result, Dong-taek didn't fully understand what he meant. On the other hand, Du-shik was furious as his election poll numbers continued to drop due to the recent exposure of the case. At that moment, Yoon-ki suggested meeting with the head of the Special Investigation Department at the prosecutor's office to seek assistance, a suggestion that Du-shik immediately agreed to. Meanwhile, Young-yi was called to her son's school for a meeting. The teacher informed her that her son had been bullying his classmates. Not only that, the teacher explained that whenever her son disliked someone, he would hit anyone near that person. Because of this, Young-yi recalled witnessing Du-shik hit someone in front of their son and realized that this might have influenced her son's behavior. Some time later, after finding information about the house where the blonde woman who became prostitute was killed, Dong-taek and Seon went there to investigate further. While Seon was checking the scene, she heard someone running outside. When she tried to trip the person, but ended up falling himself. It turned out the person to be Jae-sang, who accidentally bumped into a pole, causing his nose to bleed. Dong Taek then returned with a woman who lived nearby. At that moment, the woman told him that a woman named Doo-hee lived in that house and made a living by becoming a prostitute. Apparently, Doo-hee always boasted about her son, claiming he was from a prestigious family. Additionally, the woman added that twice a year, in summer and winter, a luxury car would arrive at midnight to visit Doo-hee and her son, but she could never see the driver's face. She also mentioned that Doo-hee was still alive, contrary to the rumors of her death, but she could no longer take care of herself. After returning home, Young-hee asked her son why he acted the way he did. Her son explained that he learned from what he saw. It turned out, every time he watched his father abuse his mother, he felt overwhelmed with anger and pain. Hearing this, Young-hee regretted that she was a powerless mother. The scene shifted to the prosecutor's office the next morning. Everyone was enjoying the morning when Young-hee suddenly appeared, surprising everyone. At that moment, Jae-sang revealed that he had made a deal with Young-hee, which caused the department head to scold him for acting alone. Young-hee then stated that the price for providing evidence was her son's future and her escape from her abusive husband. In the interrogation room, Young-hee asked Jae-sang how he planned to get her out of this situation, considering the difficulty of escaping from Doo-shik. Jae-sang explained that he knew someone who owned a private island in the Philippines, and once they secured the evidence, he would arrange for her and her son to flee there. Once everything was settled, he would help her file for divorce. Young-hee then told him that she had seen a bloodied hammer in Doo-shik's safe. As a result, Jae-sang asked when she could bring the evidence, and she replied that she would retrieve it that night since Doo-shik was meeting with the head prosecutor and would not answer his phone. At the same time, Seon objected to acting immediately, saying it was too dangerous for the person providing the evidence. However, Jae-sang argued that if there was no better option, they had to proceed. That night, Young-hee used the excuse of arranging flowers in Doo-shik's office to get in and take the evidence. At the same time, Seon and Dong Taek then followed her in a car. While driving, Young-hee received a picture of her son being kidnapped and panicked. She then got a call from an unknown number, and it turned out to be Pil-woo. It turned out, Pil-woo had sensed something was wrong with Young-hee and sent people to follow her. He knew that Young-hee was helping Jae-sang, so he took action first and kidnapped her son to threaten her. At the same time, the news of Young-hee and her son's disappearance finally reached the team, which made them panicked. When Young-hee arrived at the location, Pil-woo revealed that he was Doo-shik's illegitimate son, a secret that had been hidden from him for years. Pil-woo then shared the miserable life he had lived with a mother who was greedy for money, exploiting wealthy men and becoming pregnant to extort money from them. All this time, Pil-woo grew up in an environment of abuse and neglect from his own mother, and he was the one who had attacked her. After that, Pil-woo used the hammer that Young-hee had brought to knock her unconscious. Meanwhile, Jae-sang was sitting in his office when he received the news and rushed to the scene, only to find Young-hee lying dead on the floor. Moments later, Doo-shik ran toward Pil-woo and saw him covered in blood. Pil-woo, still smiling, told Doo-shik that this time he had protected him. Doo-shik then grabbed Pil-woo by the neck and demanded to know why he had done this. Pil-woo responded that Young-hee had taken evidence to the police to report Doo-shik's crimes. It seemed that Doo-shik was being psychologically manipulated by Pil-woo as he couldn't fight back. After Young-hee's death, Doo-shik showed no emotion and continued his election campaign, eventually winning. He then continued to plan ways to cover up his dirty deeds. Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Seon and Dong Taek were questioning two captured criminals. At that moment, the two confessed to all their crimes with a defiant attitude. Angered, Seon lashed out at them, but was restrained. Not long after, at the prosecutor's office, Seon stormed into Jae-sang's office, accusing him of being responsible for everything that had happened. However, Jae-sang explained that he did it all to protect Seon from getting hurt. As they argued, Dong Taek rushed in and turned on the television, showing news reports stating that Jae-sang was under investigation for manipulating the law and falsifying evidence. Soon after, both Jae-sang and Suk-jun were summoned to the prosecutor general's office, where they were harshly reprimanded and dismissed from their positions. Meanwhile, Pil-woo continued his drug experiments on himself, acting calm and indifferent. In a parking garage, he saw someone holding a hammer and suddenly recalled the day he attacked everyone at the orphanage. Soon after, Pil-woo then approached Do-shik and offered to help him. On the other hand, Seon sat in her office, recalling the time she visited the hospital to see Young Yi and her son, but instead found Jae-sang there, apologizing to the boy. Jae-sang had even knelt down, expressing deep regret. Later, when Seon arrived home from work, she noticed footprints and sensed danger. She quickly drew her gun for protection and followed the footprints into her bedroom, where she found Jae-sang drunk and asleep in her bed. When Jae-sang woke up and saw Seon, he thought he had returned to the other world. As a result, he immediately hugged Seon and apologized for not protecting her. Seon, though confused, did not resist. The next morning, they arrived at the office to find protesters shouting insults at Jae-sang. A student who had been a victim of violence caused by Jae-sang tried to attack him, but Dong-taek intervened. After the student was taken away, Jae-sang saw the heartbroken expression on the student's face and remembered the happy family he had known in the other world. Overcome with shame, Jae-sang reflected on the terrible things he had done in this world. After the incident, Dong-taek confronted Jae-sang, telling him that their goals had always been different and questioning why Jae-sang had protected bad people while they suffered the consequences. Filled with guilt, Jae-sang admitted that he had lost all dignity. During a meeting, Suk-jun informed everyone that Jae-sang would likely be charged with abuse of power, and within a week, the special investigation team would be disbanded. However, he decided to give Jae-sang one last chance. Suk-jun said that before the mayor's inauguration ceremony, Jae-sang had to solve the case immediately. Sometime later, Dong-taek and his subordinates immediately went to the hospital after receiving information about Do-hee's whereabouts. The doctor explained that Do-hee was suffering from a brain hematoma due to a severe concussion, which caused aphasia, difficulty in thinking, and trouble speaking. When they entered her room, they found her unconscious. However, when they mentioned the case, Do-hee began to panic and lost control. Meanwhile, Jae-sang and Seon visited a hypnotist. Apparently, Jae-sang wanted to use hypnosis to recover lost memories that could help solve the case. Under hypnosis, Jae-sang recalled everything that had happened that night in the other world with Seon, from searching for her to being beaten and tied up, and then seeing a man with a bat tattoo. At the same time, Seon, standing beside him, was stunned by his confession. Back at the office, Seon asked Jae-sang what had happened during the hypnosis. Urged to answer, Jae-sang explained that while unconscious, he had lived in a different world. At the same time, after asking the nurse if Do-hee had any family, Dong-taek suddenly discovered the fact that the hospital was funded by Do-shik and Pil-woo. Back at the office, Seon still did not believe Jae-sang's story, saying that he must be crazy and should seek mental treatment after the accident. When the team gathered all the information from their investigation, they found that Do-hee had named her son after Sun-woo's company, which was owned by the man they were investigating, and discovered that the company had once belonged to Do-shik. Not only that, the team also found a song that Do-hee often sang. When Seon heard it, she was shocked because it was the exact same song Jae-sang had sung during hypnosis. Meanwhile, Do-shik is seen planning to eliminate Pil-woo, whom he saw as his biggest obstacle, but he didn't know that Pil-woo had planted a bug in his room and heard the entire plan. As a result, Pil-woo vowed to teach Do-shik a lesson. On the other hand, the investigation team found a man who had worked at the orphanage where Seon's brother had stayed. They brought him in for questioning, where the man recounted that a boy named Sun-woo had enrolled at the orphanage. After his arrival, strange things began to happen, such as livestock were found dead with crushed heads, and the other children at the orphanage were injured. Not only that, he also had seen Suk-ho questioning Sun-woo, asking if he was responsible for these incidents, but his reaction only gave them chills. Sun-woo later fell down the stairs, leading everyone to believe that the principal had pushed him. As a result, the principal was ridiculed and given the nickname the Devil in Disguise. After hearing this, Seon concluded that the incidents at the orphanage were not caused by Do-shik, but by Sun-woo. Afterward, Jae-sang called two of his colleagues to the hospital where Do-hee was being treated to steal internal data. When Jae-sang arrived, he heard a familiar song and saw Pil-woo singing it. As a result, he approached, pretending to engage in conversation. As Pil-woo was about to leave, Jae-sang called out Sun-woo, which freezing Pil-woo in his tracks. Jae-sang then shared all the clues he had gathered, which made Pil-woo immediately warn Jae-sang to protect those he cared about, as they might be targeted in the same way. This enraged Jae-sang, who grabbed Pil-woo by the collar. As the door closed, Pil-woo expressed his fear, not understanding how Jae-sang had uncovered his secret. Back at the police station, Jae-sang learned that Seon was set to receive an award the next day. Jae-sang became anxious because, in the other world, an incident had occurred on the same day. Soon after, seeing Jae-sang standing alone, Seon asked if something was wrong. However, Jae-sang simply told her to go somewhere safe, far away, after accepting her award. When Seon asked the reason, Jae-sang didn't answer and instead hugged her, filled with worry. The next day, Jae-sang and his colleagues discovered new evidence and were on their way to secure it. On the way, Jae-sang called Dong-taek and asked him to stay with Seon all day to protect her. As they entered an elevator, Jae-sang encountered a man with a bat tattoo and sensed something was wrong. Before he could react, Jae-sang was knocked unconscious and tied up. At the same time, Seon received a call from a colleague informing her that Jae-sang had been kidnapped. While searching for clues, Seon recalled what she had heard during Jae-sang's hypnosis session and felt terrified and panicked. On the other hand, Pil-woo was in Do-shik's office, threatening him to hand over the company's management. If he refused, Pil-woo would release a video of Jae-sang's execution in Do-shik's campaign room. Therefore, the video would become headline news within 30 minutes. At the same time, the police received this information and were on their way to the location where they believed Jae-sang was being held. At that moment, they saw people approaching and mobilized all forces to fight and stop them. During the fight, Seon was struck by one of them with a stick, but Dong-taek shielded her with a knife and urged her to quickly save Jae-sang. However, the door was blocked by several men, so Seon used a chair to break the glass door and rushed inside to free Jae-sang. On the other hand, Jae-sang's subordinates brought evidence related to the case to the office and presented the clues to Suk-jun. The next day, Do-shik arrived at his office, only to be surrounded by reporters questioning him about the previous night's events. As a result, all the investors involved in Do-shik's project refused to answer his calls. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, Yoon-ki suggested destroying all documents connected to Do-shik. Not long after, when Jae-sang returned from the hospital, his subordinates were overjoyed to see him alive. At the same time, Suk-jun called everyone into a meeting and revealed documents found in the victim's bag. Unexpectedly, there was a note addressed to Jae-sang written by Young-yi before she died. It turned out, Young-yi had prepared these documents to help Jae-sang investigate in case anything happened to her. After analyzing the clues, the team decided to investigate the funds of a local pastor. When they arrived, they found the pastor's accomplice preparing to destroy the documents. Meanwhile, Jae-sang went to Do-shik's office, urging him to cooperate with the investigation. At the same time, the pastor was being interrogated. Despite their efforts, Do-shik insisted that he knew nothing. Seeing this, Jae-sang told his subordinates to turn off the recording device. He then suggested that Do-shik could stay safe by placing all the blame on Pil-woo. On the other side, Pil-woo stubbornly continued testing his bioengineered drugs on humans. However, Pil-woo instructed his subordinates to find a place to hide and clear his name. Shortly after, Seon was on her way home when some women from her neighborhood pulled her inside to pray for Jae-sang's safety. When Seon reached the front gate, Jae-sang told her that if, one day, her hatred for him faded, he would tell her about the other world. The moment how happy they were, how much he loved her, and how adorable their daughter, Bona, was. Later, Jae-sang confronted Pil-woo and played a recording of his conversation with Do-shik, in which Do-shik said he would put all the blame on him. However, the recording had been edited by Jae-sang's team to carry out their plan to divide them. After hearing the recording, Pil-woo looked frightened. At the same time, Do-shik was persuading Pil-woo's right-hand man to betray him, and it seemed like he agreed. Do-shik even arranged a funeral for Pil-woo, with reporters waiting. Afterward, Do-shik went to meet Pil-woo, who was shocked to learn that his right-hand man had betrayed him. Unbeknownst to them, two of Jae-sang's subordinates waited in ambush and called in their team. Dushik then ordered someone to restrain Pil-woo and administer drugs to eliminate him. Unexpectedly, the situation suddenly shifted as everyone around Dushik turned out to be Pil-woo's agents. As a result, Dushik was stunned and terrified, while Pil-woo accused him of abandoning him to a miserable life. In the end, Pil-woo injected a drug into Dushik's neck. Not long after, the investigation team arrived, but Dushik was already lying lifeless on the ground. As a fierce fight broke out between the opposing sides, Pil-woo and his accomplices managed to escape. With no other option, Jae-sang tried to chase after them relentlessly, but to no avail. Meanwhile, Suk-jun informed the pastor and Yoon-ki that Dushik had died, so they needed to confess. Elsewhere, after escaping the investigation team, Pil-woo prepared to board a ship to cross the border, still intent on continuing his human experiments overseas. Pil-woo even ordered his subordinates to take the girl he had tested the drugs on and escape with her. After the laboratory was abandoned, the girl remained tied up and alone. Shortly after, Jae-sang's investigation team discovered the lab's location. At that moment, Pil-woo's accomplices arrived and took the girl away. As they got into the car, the police blocked their path, demanding the girl's release. The police also ordered the accomplices to call Pil-woo. As a result, when he learned that the girl he had spent billions testing his drug on had been captured by the police, he was furious. Soon after, Jae-sang was invited to a television station for an interview regarding the Pil-woo case. All the information and crimes were broadcast publicly, and a national arrest warrant was issued. Upon returning home, Jae-sang noticed smoke coming from Seon's house. Worried that there might be a fire, he rushed inside to check. It turned out that Seon had forgotten to turn off the stove. Soon after, he found Seon silently crying and comforted her. Seon then asked Jae-sang about life in the other world, and he shared the happy moments he had dreamed of. The next morning, when Seon woke up, she heard the doorbell ring. She then opened the door to find a bouquet of flowers. As she picked it up and turned around to go back inside, she saw Pil-woo standing in the yard at the same time. Seon suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed. Soon after, Jae-sang, who was bringing food for Seon, saw the mess and went inside to investigate. He quickly deduced that something had happened to her, before rushed to the prosecutor's office and shared his suspicions, predicting that Pil-woo would target Seon at her old house. However, when they arrived, they found nothing. Not long after, they received news that Pil-woo's mother had died in the hospital, and everyone realized they had gone to the wrong place. At the same time, Pil-woo had taken Seon to the rooftop of the hospital and tied her up. Pil-woo was about to attack her, but Seon grabbed a shard of glass and knocked him down. However, still feeling the effects of the anesthesia, she couldn't run and fell. Pil-woo then dragged her back, but Jae-sang and the others were seen racing to the rooftop. Just as Pil-woo was about to strike, they arrived in time. At that moment, Dong-taek shot Pil-woo in the arm. With no other option, Pil-woo tried to do the unthinkable from the building, but he was saved by Dong-taek and Jae-sang. After that, Seon was given the handcuffs to arrest her family's killer. After everything was over, Jae-sang and Seon visited Young-yi's grave. Later, they took a walk together, where Jae-sang told her that he wouldn't stay by her side anymore and was about to leave. Unexpectedly, Seon called him back and said that she wanted to be with Jae-sang for the rest of her life, as he had to stay with her until her anger subsided. Because of this, they embraced each other, overwhelmed with emotion. All the dangers and hardships had passed, and life returned to peace. Not long after, Dong-taek continued his work at a new police station, and Suk-jun also found the love of his life. Some time later, Seon called Jae-sang, telling him that she was at the hospital. As a result, Jae-sang rushed over in a panic, only to find out that Seon was pregnant. With this happy news, Jae-sang was overjoyed and promised to take care of Seon and their child for the rest of his life. They embraced each other happily, ready to welcome the new member of their family. Moral lesson from the story: never try to trip someone unless you want to test how fast the ground can catch you first. And remember, poles might not look dangerous, but they always win in a fight with your face.